All right, let's go to the inflation figures out today because Jim Chalmers' spin, he thinks it's fantastic, but I tell you what, it's bad news for anyone hoping for a rate cut before the end of the year. With underlying inflation rising from 3.2% to 3.5%, so it's up, defying expectation, the odds are on Michelle Bullock sitting tight on interest rates when the RBA meets in December. Now, this will be the last meeting for the year, obviously. They don't meet in January. The next meeting will be back in February. Joining me now to discuss the implications of all of this, former Treasury Assistant Secretary David Pearl. David, I had to get you on because I want someone to cut through the spin here. Yes, headline inflation steady at a 3-year low, but when the RBA meets next month, next week it'll be in fact, their focus will be on the underlying number, won't it? And that's the problem.
Thanks for having me, Peter. You're exactly right. In fact, the RBA has themselves said that headline inflation, which currently is below the 2 to 3% target, will be at 3.7%. It will jump back up above target late next year. So fight against inflation is actually going backwards, and any spin you're hearing from the Treasurer or anybody else that the inflation challenge has been met is false.
So the expectation from economists leading into these data set out today was that we may get at the front end of next year, the first quarter, some sort of rate relief. They're talking about that February meeting of the RBA. Now they're all running around recanting that today, saying it's really absolutely the back end of the year. What's your assessment?
Well, Peter, I think a lot of the market economists understand they've got money to make and they've got clients to keep happy. They tend to get very fixated on month-by-month numbers. But if we take a bigger picture look, Peter, we had our last cash rate reduction in November 2023. I have no doubt that Michelle Bullock and the RBA board that collectively set interest rates would have thought that inflation would have been within the target in a substantive sense by now. That would have been the political strategy. It would have allowed interest rates to be reduced before the election. But that hasn't been the case. Inflation has come down very, very slowly. In fact, it's going sideways. Contrast that with what we're seeing in every other developed country where their central banks adopted a more conservative inflation-first approach to raising rates. Their inflation rates are coming down. We squibbed it. We took our eye off inflation to try and maximise employment. I think that was a political call. I don't think Michelle Bullock would have wanted to do that. And now we're stuck with inflation going sideways.
She's also made the point in the recent meeting minutes, not just the last one, but I think it's been a consistent point from her, that she's concerned about government spending. She's concerned about the growth of the public sector wage bill, the employment that keeps going on and on and on. And we've got numbers out today that it's on the up and up. But she's also concerned at the debt burden of our states. She's concerned about Labor's debt burden at a federal level. We had all those numbers out from Deloitte this week that said the downturn in the budget, the reversal of the good fortune, if I can call it that, from the 2 accidental surpluses has been quite stark, and the deficit is greater than your old bosses at Treasury had previously forecast. What do you make of the Deloitte numbers?
The Deloitte numbers aren't particularly surprising, Peter, because forecasts are to economics what astrology is to astronomy. I don't think we should put too much importance in them, but yes, they've showed that Treasury adopted an optimistic forecast in the last round. But on your point, Peter, about the role that fiscal policy can play in support of monetary policy, Michelle Bullock's absolutely right. But we have Jim Chalmers, the Treasurer, who has said that interest rates at the current level are smashing the economy and any reduction in government spending would smash the economy. So we've got an economy that has an inflation fire that's burning, and we have a Treasurer that's basically ruled out the 2 short-term tools we have in our kit bag to deal with it. So the inflation problem is going to continue to the election. It reminds me a little bit of Whitlam, where there was no focus on inflation. And as you know, and as your viewers know, it eats away at living standards. And we've seen how dramatic and lethal that is. Worse than the sharp recessions we had in the 80s and 90s. It's squeezing people, and it will be a decade, I think, for living standards start to turn around.
Just quickly before we go, $87 billion in this off-budget spend by the government. We've just found out about this one today. That's a shocker. I call it creative accounting. What do you think?
Totally agree. The more you move liabilities and expenses off budget, the closer you get to Victoria under Joan Kirner or countries like Greece. Budgets, as you know, Peter, are critical to transparency and accountability for the executive government. They're a statement of economic and fiscal intent. And if you shift the action away from the budget, it creates scope for corruption and cronyism.
Right, I'll just remind my viewers, you are a former Assistant Secretary at the Treasury Department, a really senior bureaucrat, former senior bureaucrat, and to use language like Whitlam, Victoria, Greece, I think people at home are shocked, David. I think they're starting to really understand what's going on with the books in Canberra, and it's not good. Thank you for your time.